Mother-in-law abandons my child, shows up after 25 years and expects to be accepted as a grandmother. When my son was 3 days old, his mother decided she didn't want a child anymore, so I've raised him as a single father since then. She claims she's not ready to have a child and refused to even feed him or hold him. I wanted to give her some time. I thought that maybe it's just postpartum depression. I was ready to be there for her, but she was serious. She packed her stuff and left the hospital. Her last words were that she wants to see neither me or our son ever again, and she kept that promise. I got the feeling that mother-in-law had something to do with it, because during her pregnancy she was talking all the time about how young her daughter is and how inappropriate of a moment this is for her to have a child. I think mother-in-law somehow secretly persuaded her to take this step. So I was left alone with an infant in my hands. It definitely wasn't easy. I was just 21 years old, I had to leave college and work very hard to give my son everything he needed. Fortunately, I wasn't completely alone. There were people who helped me to get through the hardest period, people who babysat him while I was working, who gave me advice on how to take care of a baby, and I'll be forever thankful to them. When he grew up a little, it became easier. I could send him to a kindergarten and work without asking people to take care of him while I'm not there. During all this time I hope to hear from his mother. I hope that she'll eventually come around and realize you can't just leave your child like a worthless piece of trash. But, even though I had left her my contacts and she could call me or write me a letter whenever, she didn't. I never heard from her. She never once used her rights to visit him. When he was little, he often asked me why his mother left him, why she didn't want him. And I didn't know what to answer because I always tried not to speak badly of his mother in front of him. Now my son is 25 years old, he's a hard-working, educated young man, and I'm so proud of him, and I'm proud of myself that I was able to raise him to be a good person. We stopped talking about his mother a long time ago. It was his initiative. He was like, well, if she doesn't want to be with us, then it's her loss and there's nothing we can do about it. So recently mother-in-law appeared on our doorstep. Without a call, without any kind of notification, she was just there, and she had come to visit her grandson. I couldn't believe my ears, and at first, I almost didn't recognize her. And she was behaving as if she was a caring grandmother who had come to see her grandchild like she does all the time. Not like she was gone for 25 years. When my son saw her, he didn't recognize her either. I have shown him pictures of his mother and his grandmother just in case they show up one day, but I never really thought that they would. She ran up to him and hugged him just like a loving grandmother would, asking how he's doing and how big and beautiful he has become, and he pushed her away and looked kind of confused. I told him that it's his grandmother who randomly showed up to visit him, and he was like, oh, and walked away from her. Mother-in-law didn't take this reaction very well. She looked at me and was like, what have you taught him if he doesn't even say hello to his grandmother? He's looking at me as if I'm a stranger. Haven't you told him about his mother and me or shown him our pictures? Well, technically you are a stranger, mother-in-law. He had never seen you in person, so why are you so surprised? You show up out of thin air after 25 years when he's all grown up and expect him to treat you with love. Isn't it kind of delusional? My son said, Dad did show me your picture, but I needed no picture, I needed you to be there for me. He was quite hateful with her, throwing question after question at her, and mother-in-law's responses were so incredibly narrow-minded, it looked like she wasn't expecting him to ask any questions. He asked her where his mother was, and mother-in-law was like, oh, she's doing very well, she's living together with a great man and she has 2 nice kids. She has gotten over that misunderstanding about your birth. She was acting as if her daughter was the victim here. As if we were the ones who left her. He asked her why did his mother abandon him. Mother-in-law said, well, she was such a young girl, it would be crazy for her to have a child at that age. She had her whole life ahead of her and a baby would only be an obstacle. You must understand it, she didn't want to lose her freedom. Honestly, her daughter was older than me when our son was born, she was 24. I don't think it's too early to have a child, it's not like she was 14 or something. Actually, age has nothing to do with it. I could have given up my son too, I was very young as well. But I didn't because I loved him and I wanted to be his father. At this point I wanted to show mother-in-law the door. Obviously, she wasn't welcome in our house, but my son stopped me. He had one more question. He asked why mother-in-law didn't want to be his grandmother. His mother left him, fine, but why did mother-in-law leave him too? Mother-in-law said, well, I had no time to take care of you. I was a young woman too, I had my life too. And grandkids are only obligated to take care of grandparents when they're old, and that's why I'm here. Then my son told her to leave and never come back. He said he doesn't want to see her ever again and he won't help her with anything. And as she was leaving, she attacked me like that's what I thought. A man alone cannot raise a proper human being. Such a rude and impolite boy, he would have turned out better in an orphanage than with you. So according to mother-in-law, the conclusion is, don't have children while you're young, or if you do, feel free to leave them and then come back a few decades later and they'll love you even though they have never received any kind of care from you. But seriously, what the hell was she expecting? My family cut contact with me for 9 years because of a lie. Now it's my turn for revenge. My cousin accused me of something I didn't do, and my family were so disgusted by me that they cut contact. I just feel so lost on what to do. I grew up in what was probably the most normal of normal households. My parents worked a lot, but still managed to care for me and my 3 older sisters. We were never super close as a family, but never had any issues either. The same goes for my extended family. They always lived a few hours away, but we saw each other during summer holidays or Christmas and always got along great. But when we got older we naturally grew apart as everyone had their own lives. I'm 31 now. In 2014, when I was 22 and attending uni, I got a phone call from my mother that turned my life upside down. I remember I didn't even answer at first, because I was gaming with friends. But she called again immediately after the first call. This was an unwritten rule in the family. If you call twice like that, it's important. Like someone died important. So when she called again, I excused myself and answered, only to hear chaos in the other end. Like people were arguing. But when my mom realized I had answered, it sounded like she went to another room and closed the door. I just asked what was going on and I heard she was crying. My memory of this conversation is a bit blurry, but she basically asked me if I had something to confess to regarding Eve. Eve is my cousin on my mom's side and is 7 years younger than me, 15 at the time. At that point, I hadn't even seen Eve for several years. I just said no and asked what this is about. She just cried even harder and started accusing me of sexually assaulting Eve back when we were children. That Eve had told everything to my sister, and that my sister told my mother and my aunt. Eve had told them that back when she was 9, and I 16, she'd been playing in my room when I came in and started feeling her under her clothes and kissing her. My mother screamed at me to say something, but I couldn't even speak. It was all so absurd. I remember thinking that must be some bad joke. The last thing I remember saying was that it's not true and that Eve is lying. But then my mom goes on saying that Eve gave such a detailed description of where and how. Then she kept asking something like, "Did you do this? Did you do this?" And I just screamed back at her no. Each time. It all ended with my mom putting me on speaker and both my mom and dad saying that they don't want anything to do with me and never to contact them again. 2 of my sisters texted me later that day, pretty much saying that I'm disgusting and then blocked me. I know it's weird, but after that call I went to have a long shower. To this day I still don't know why I did that. After calming down, I started calling and texting everyone, even Eve. No one answered and the ones who hadn't blocked my number by then quickly did so. The only thing I heard back was from my father who texted me to stop contacting them and that they need to heal. That was 9 years ago and I haven't spoken to anyone in my family since that day. To say this effed me up is an understatement. I was living in a haze for weeks after that and hardly ate at all. It didn't help that this was right before I was supposed to defend my bachelor's thesis and was already stressed out. Luckily my co-writer sensed something was up and saved me by controlling the conversation so that I got the easy parts. Without him I am sure I would have failed. Needless to say, no one came to my graduation. Then started the worst period of my life. I spent the first year expecting the cops to knock on my door and arresting me for sexual abuse. I didn't land any jobs, just living off my saved money. I drank a lot and did oxy. I also grew resentful and violent. The only reason I didn't hurt anyone is because no one was around. My neighbor called the cops on me once after I had smashed a glass. But I managed to convince the officers that I had just dropped it, and they went away since there were no others inside my apartment. Instead of sleeping, I spent my nights planning how I could hurt Eve and make sure no one ever found out. Even thinking how I could actually do the things she'd accused me of, but much worse. I know, I'm not proud of that. I landed my first real job in my field in late 2015. Only then did things start to improve. I focused all my time on my job, as it gave me something normal to do. Recovery was a slow process, but I drank less, sober now for 4+ years, and smiled more. I lived cheap and earned good money, so I made a point of buying myself a nice gift for my birthdays, a VR headset, a motorcycle, Lego etc. And last year I moved from my shitty apartment and bought a small house. It was an old dream of mine to have my own garage and a garden to care for. This has boosted me even more. So my life is okay now. I still have problems. I've been on antidepressants for the last few years and while they help, it's not in a happy way. They simply remove the dark thoughts and replace them with dead ones. My trust in other people is close to non-existent. I've tried dating, but only been on 2 dates with 2 different women. It's really hard to speak like a normal person when it comes down to it. And what would I tell a potential partner when she asked about my family? Oh, you know they accused me of a heinous crime and we're not talking anymore. But I didn't do it, I swear. My field is very male-dominated, so the only woman I really speak to is my therapist, who I like a lot. If this text was difficult to follow, I apologize. I'm not good with words on the best of days, and I started rambling a bit when it all came back to me. It's already getting long so I will fast forward to my current issue. A few days ago, I received a text from my mother. It felt unreal and I was scared to open it at first, so I just stared at the notification. For hours before opening it. Yesterday, another text followed. Translated, they basically say, Text 1, "Hi, it's been so long since we talked. We miss you and want to know how you're doing." Here she writes a long text about my sisters and how my nieces and nephews are getting big. I didn't even know I was an uncle. Know that we love you and always will. Mom and dad text too, "Hi, we understand if you don't want to talk to us after what happened, but please listen. Last month, the subject of you was brought up at a family gathering. During this, Eve was downplaying everything that had happened to her. It got so awkward that she finally admitted that nothing happened and that she probably just dreamt it. We were all appalled by this. When we last spoke, we wanted to protect Eve and did the only thing we thought we could do. We know that's not excusing how you were treated. What Eve did was wrong and we're all angry at her. We have called everyone that knew and told them the truth. We all want to speak with you and your sisters want you to meet their families. Please write back if you can find it in you to forgive us. Mom and Dad." So yeah. That's my situation right now. I haven't answered, but they no doubt know I've seen it. Truth be told, I'm seething. So many old, SHT memories are now stirring again. I don't want to forgive them and I wouldn't trust myself to be in the same room as them right now. Part of me wants to call my family and unleash everything on them, to guilt them with everything I went through until they all hit their rock bottom. Then dedicate my life to making my cousin's life as miserable as possible. The other part wants to ignore them and continue with my okayish life with my motorcycle and my garden to keep me company. I don't have any friends. The only people I speak to are my coworkers, but we're not really close. I've called my therapist's clinic, but they told me she's on vacation and won't be available for weeks, and I don't want anyone else than her. Cheat on me when I have cancer? Let's see how you like it when you're disabled. Plus update. My girlfriend and I dated for 4 years and had what I thought was a great relationship. We were both well-established professionals who both owned homes in the same neighborhood and both had daughters in the home. Her daughter was 11 and mine was 16 when we met. We had actually planned to get married, build a house, and raise the two together. We planned the house build because she had recently been diagnosed with a neurological disease that would eventually put her in a wheelchair, and need something ADA-friendly. During the planning stages, I began doing landscape and construction projects on her home to increase the resale value. All in, I invested roughly $30,000 into the home, running everything through my side construction business for tax, permitting, and resale purposes. We had a contract that payment would be made upon the sale of the home. I produced invoices for each and every project, but never pushed for payment because of the prior agreement. Fast forward 6 months and we're looking at property to develop and finalize drawings on the home when I began feeling ill. I couldn't eat, constantly vomiting and passing blood. I began noticing that my abdomen looked swollen, which was odd because we were both very clean eaters and were in the gym every day. So I went to the doctor and began having tests done. During this time, she began having small cognitive issues, and the stress of her current position was exacerbating her condition, so she took a $20,000 per annum cut in pay along with a lesser position inside the company. After a month or so of different tests, and a biopsy, it came back that I had a golf ball-sized tumor in my stomach, and would need to begin chemotherapy. So I began chemo and radiation treatments, which made me extremely ill. She was spending time helping around my place on the weekends and staying over more, to the point that they were both at my home, more than theirs. At this point, I suggested that we go ahead and put one of our houses on the market, and move in together until the new house was built. I have great supplemental insurance as well as a long-term illness plan, so using that coupled with the sale of one of our houses would push us through comfortably, and help ease the financial stress on her. Shortly after this discussion, she became extremely distant. Her daughter wasn't coming down and hanging out with mine anymore, she had excuses for not getting together. She quit driving me to treatments and stopped staying over. She then dropped a bomb. A sentence that will forever be burned into my psyche: I love you, but I can't see myself taking care of someone this sick in the long term, and I don't think we should see each other any longer. She broke up with me over text. But it only got worse from there. Update: her breaking up with me completely broke me, I won't lie. This was the first woman I had ever opened up to and planned a life with since my wife died when my children were 1 and 3. However, I tried to be mature about it. I forced myself to understand her position and to accept what I could not change. I calmly gathered all of her things, packed them neatly, loaded them in my truck, and took them to her house to leave on the back porch while she was at work in order to avoid any awkward exchanges. Walking around the back and under the porch cover, I put down a box and saw her in her back living room, on the couch having sex with a man that she had introduced to me as a lifelong friend. I had dinner and drinks with this man and his girlfriend. We had gone on vacation with them as well. I never spoke of the incident with her, and simply sent her a text later, explaining that I would leave her things on my side porch to pick up at her convenience. I discovered 8 or 9 months later from his now ex-girlfriend that they had broken up due to him confessing that he had been sleeping with my girlfriend, dating back to about the time we were finishing drawings on the new home. Now I'm pissed. At this point, I had finished chemo and radiation for the time being and was feeling healthier. I was going through some much neglected paperwork when I ran across a file that contained $32,680 in unpaid, long overdue invoices, which were promptly sent to my attorney to begin lien proceedings on the home. It turns out that I couldn't have done this a moment too soon because she was set to put her house on the market. Coupled with interest over the course of, what was then, 19 months overdue, the invoices were hefty. That, along with the agreement of settling them when the house was sold and attorney fees, left her with roughly $10,000 after the sale of the home and settling her current mortgage. She promptly had to back out of the purchase of another home and moved in with her oldest daughter, sister-in-law, and 2 grandchildren. She also had to leave her job and begin receiving disability. I ran into her a little over a year ago and she looked as if she had aged 20 years, and was in the wheelchair we had talked about. We chatted cordially but briefly and I excused myself and went on with my day. A few days later, her younger daughter called me and spoke of my running into her mom, and asked if we could hang out sometime. I gave a vague answer, thanked her for calling and again, went on with my day. The ex then called me a week or so later and began apologizing for leaving me as she did. Again, cordial but short. I thanked her for calling and hung up. She began texting and this went on for several weeks until once she asked if I could ever see us rekindling what we had, to which I replied, I can't see myself taking care of someone so sick in the long term. Remember the box on your back porch? Did you think that your friend brought that over to you from my house? Good luck to you. Goodbye. My jealous girlfriend kept on verbally assaulting her half-sister and ruining the wedding, so I ended up proposing. So I, 25 male, and my girlfriend, 25F, let's call her Alexa, have been together for 3 years. Alexa has always compared herself to other people, she is hyper-competitive and always wants to be the center of attention. I love her so much because when it's just us, she has the sweetest and most thoughtful personality. However, when we are out at events she usually lets her ugly emotions out. A few days ago it was her brother's, George, wedding and we attended. Us and a few of our very close family friends were at the same table later at the venue. Turns out my girlfriend's half-sister, let's call her Rachel, was invited and was assigned at the same table as me and my girlfriend. I have to note that Rachel is my mother-in-law's daughter. She had right before she had Alexa and then completely abandoned Rachel with her dad to live her life with Alexa's dad. They hadn't found out about Rachel's existence until mother-in-law confessed to George that she had a daughter before them. So George reached out and found Rachel and she was happy to maintain a relationship with them, but Alexa was completely against it and didn't even want to meet her. That's why Rachel and Alexa don't get along. That was 4 years back. I also have to say that I have met Rachel and we got along well. Since Rachel didn't know anyone else at the wedding, George put her at the same table as me and Alexa and our friends. My girlfriend was very proud to be sat at the closest table to the family, which signifies utmost importance among the guests. So when Rachel also sat there, she immediately got angry, and was put in a bitter mood. It is important to note that Rachel was substitute best man, because the original best man was extremely sick, and upon finding out this information, it probably tipped over Alexa. She kept throwing little innocent insults at her and then said she was just joking. Rachel didn't really seem to mind, and just brushed it off. However, when the groom was giving his speech, and repetitively mentioned how Rachel's constant efforts as a consultant to his company allowed for his family and future kids not to be homeless, Rachel started crying from the many applause she was getting. On the other hand, my girlfriend just grew more resentful. I knew that my Alex was going to do something terrible, and I wish I could have just pulled her aside back then. That way none of this would have ever had to happen. A couple minutes after the speech, she started off again with the loaded insults. Again, Rachel did not mind until Alexa said, "So, Rachel, how's your dad?" I almost lost it then. Rachel's dad passed when she was 15 and everyone knew. Because of her father passing, and not being in contact with her mother at the time, she had to work 3 jobs at 16. She somehow managed to graduate college with full honors, which led her to create her own $1 million consulting firm. Rachel was also a model for some of the most popular perfume and clothing brands. Rachel didn't say anything but just looked at her with an almost pitiful look, while obviously holding back tears. She then excused herself and went to get a drink. I turned to Alexa and tell her that if she doesn't stop being a beach and apologizes, I will leave her right there and then. Alexa got defensive, saying that I'm defending Rachel because I'm attracted to her and that I want to give her a pity F because she's the poor orphan. She said all that in front of everyone. So what I did next shocked her. Before I could get my sweet revenge, I had to individually apologize to everyone around us for Alexa's behavior. It was so bad that even the groom noticed. But I went and talked to him and explained the situation, so he just told me to do my best ability to keep Alexa calm. I knew what I had planned next was anything but calm. But I reluctantly agreed and congratulated him on the wedding. Once more. Instead of going and seeking out my girlfriend, I was too angry to talk to her, so I went and started chatting it up with Rachel. Even though she was trying to hide it, it was obvious that she had been crying. We actually got along really well, and I was used to talking to a female other than my girlfriend, especially one that was as stunning as her. She said she wanted to show me something outside behind venue, and I'm not sure whether it was the alcohol or the fact that I was so mad at Alexa, but I reluctantly followed her. I knew what I was doing was wrong and unfaithful to Alexa, and what happened next certainly wasn't my proudest moment. Don't announce your engagement at someone else's wedding, or this might happen to you. Last summer I was at a cousin's wedding. His bride and her family had been close with ours since before I was born, and the couple had known each other since they were toddlers, so it was a particularly exciting event for both sides of the family. However, after the ceremony was over and the party had only just started, one of the bridesmaids decided to announce her own engagement. The attention was immediately taken away from the newlyweds and brought to the bridesmaid Sarah and her equally smug fiancé. My cousin's wife Emma didn't make a scene or utter a single negative word about Sarah. She looked like she was on the verge of tears, but she kept grinning and acted very happy for the other couple. This was unusual, as Emma is typically quite confrontational and speaks her mind no matter the consequences. Sarah later picked Emma to be the maid of honor at her own wedding, which took place last weekend. This is where the fun begins. Emma's 2 much younger sisters were the flower girls at Sarah's wedding. At the very last moment, Emma switched out the white petals in their baskets to blue ones she had secretly brought with her. She told her sisters not to say anything about it or let the bride see them until it was time to scatter them down the aisle. Sarah looked very confused upon seeing the blue petals, which didn't coordinate whatsoever with her theme, but of course she didn't say anything about it at the moment. Most of Sarah's other bridesmaids were also Emma's friends, had attended Emma's wedding, and were in on Emma's scheme. At the reception, Emma's sisters and the other bridesmaids were tight-lipped when Sarah began demanding to know why there were blue petals. The wedding planner ended up getting a lot of abuse for not checking the flower girls' baskets before they walked down the aisle. Finally, it was time for the speeches. The speeches took place in front of a massive screen, displaying a loop of photos with Sarah and her husband, which had been compiled by Emma. Emma took the remote that controlled the presentation screen, and at first she showed some pre-approved humorous photos of Sarah with Emma and other friends to facilitate a couple lighthearted jokes. Then, at the very end, Emma said to Sarah that she must be wondering why there were blue petals instead of the white ones originally planned. That was when Emma displayed the last slide from her presentation. Emma announced in front of everyone that she was 5 months pregnant, and that she just discovered the baby was a boy, hence the blue petals. The last slide? Her ultrasound picture. There were shocked yells and gasps. Sarah had a fit, but those involved in the scheme cheered so loudly. Apparently Sarah had been very nasty to her bridesmaids before, driving several of them away and forcing the others to pay ridiculous amounts of money for dresses. Emma and my cousin were eventually thrown out of the party, but they were all smiles. Sarah's fuming mother went to confront her outside, and Emma retorted with, "Gentle, gentle. I'm pregnant." I reckon Sarah doesn't speak to the majority of those bridesmaids anymore.
My husband's best friend lied about being in an open marriage and my husband supported him. When I first started dating my husband, one of his best friends was a lying, cheating buttface. Buttface was the first in their circle of friends to get married and have children, but he still went by himself with a circle of friends to an annual week-long camping party event where he would cheat with multiple women, some as young as 17. His circle of friends politely ignored the outrageous behavior because he told everyone he had an open marriage. His wife would stay home to take care of their young children, which seemed odd, because the camping thing was very inclusive of children, but being male, none of them thought to question him about it. This behavior had gone on for several years before I came around, and was accepted as normal by the circle of friends. I was the first girlfriend to be included in the camping event, and things started out a bit rocky for me the first year with Buttface. He ended up yelling at me when his latest side chick overheard me discussing his marital status with my husband, and the side chick promptly dumped him because of his lack of full disclosure of his marital status to her prior to their recreational activities. Functional adults will be shocked to learn Buttface's wife did not know they had an open marriage. Specifically, Buttface's wife did not know he was banging other women at the campground while she was 6 months pregnant with their third child and was home watching their other two during the second year of my attendance. How did we find out Buttface had been lying to everyone about his open marriage? Buttface's wife confronted me on our return in front of everyone to ask about her husband's behavior on the trip. Since I knew she was pregnant, and he had been having unprotected intimacy, I answered her truthfully, "All I have to say is if I were you, I wouldn't let him near me without him wearing a rubber." My first answer to her had been, "Shouldn't you be asking him that?" And she had said, in front of everyone, "I'm asking you, because I know you will tell me the truth." She was right. She was pregnant, he was an idiot, and her kid didn't need to have disease issues because daddy liked it better without protection. It was a tough call, and you may not agree with it, but I stand by it. Besides, open marriage, right? The open marriage liar was caught out in front of everyone when Buttface's wife went ballistic and said many things, all of which made it clear that his open marriage existed only in his mind. To say I wasn't Buttface's favorite person after that would be an understatement. He and Buttface's wife were apparently able to patch things up and recover from the debacle, and Buttface was still someone who was important to my husband, so he and I were polite when the regular social events of our circle of friends required it. A few years later he did end up being a groomsman in our wedding, and caused some problems with his plans for the bachelor party, which should entertain the drama llamas here. Buttface wanted to burn me in effigy as part of the bachelor party celebration. One of the other groomsmen was told, became properly horrified, called husband, and that was one of our wedding fights. Both of my brothers were invited to the bachelor party and I would like to think they would have been offended on my behalf, but either way, I put my foot down and announced if it happened, Buttface was out. Hubby was still, "If Buttface isn't in the wedding, there will be no wedding," while I was all, "If Buttface pulls that stunt and you are sticking by him, damn right there will be no wedding." But it didn't happen, and our wedding did, so water under the bridge? Lest you think I was special in Buttface's eyes, he later almost derailed another wedding when he wanted a funeral theme for another bachelor party complete with casket, and the bride was offended by the insult. Thankfully, the relationship between my husband and his old friend began a natural course of drifting apart. Time passes, and then. What's your low-cost glow-up trick everyone needs to know? Although I am now long retired, I used to be a top model in my early years and walked runways with Adriana Lima and Naomi Campbell back in the day. Now, my teenage daughter has always been a bit insecure about her looks. She looks like a normal girl with a regular body, however she looks up to me a lot and it breaks my heart when she compares herself to my model days. She keeps asking me about glow-up hacks because she desperately wants to look the way I did, but even those pictures she sees of me today are edited and airbrushed. Now that my daughter is in college, the hard water there is giving her acne and inflammation, and she's never been more vulnerable. I caught her crying last month in the bathroom, just staring at the mirror at the boil-like lumps and acne all over her jaw. She was even getting bullied over it apparently. I desperately want to help her, but it has been a long time since I modeled, and our family just doesn't have the money to afford the treatments my agency bought for me, so we've had to find some alternatives. Thankfully the derm doctor saved the day. See, back when I was a model, the biggest thing was micro-infusion needling, and it still is. 20 years ago, my agency set me up with the same specialist that Jennifer Aniston had, and it's not just her. Every A-list celebrity in Hollywood is breaking the bank for this stuff. I remember using it to prepare for my walks for Chanel and Louis Vuitton to get my skin extra clear. This was literally the peak of my career. These micro-infusion facial systems were a game changer for me because they used micro-needling to inject serum straight inside skin to work inside out, instead of just being topical, not to mention all the collagen benefits. Unfortunately, if I wanted to book one of those micro-infusion sessions without an agency card, it would cost thousands of dollars, and there's no way I'm encouraging my little girl to sit at an operating table just to get some smoother skin. But the other day I was watching the dermadoctor, and he recommended a great alternative, these at-home Cure micro-infusion facial systems, which is pretty much the same thing you'd get at a beautician's office except you have to administer it yourself. Since it's much more affordable than handing a Dr. Nick thousands of dollars, I bought a kit for my daughter's birthday which was a few weeks ago. She was super excited to use it, but she hates needles, so we bought a numbing cream and now we've just turned this whole thing into a girls' spa day for the two of us. It has definitely added an element of bonding time, And not gonna lie, I was skeptical at first with these not being done professionally, but they have greatly helped her and her skin. We start by numbing our faces, which we then test by slapping each other really hard. We find this really funny, and then use the micro-infusion facial kits. With the cream it honestly hurts less than that at the salons. I even tell my daughter modeling stories to keep her distracted, like the truth about what happened with Kate Moss and so on. It's been a really strange but great bonding experience for us, and I even got the micro-infusion facial system for my husband, though he's less cooperative than my daughter and would prefer slapping dish soap on his face than doing anything legit. But my daughter is finally happy and that's all that matters to me now.